Our speaker today is Mark Rosenthal. He's the curator emeritus at Lincoln Park Zoo. He's had a few dealings with animals, which he'll tell us about, and we'll probably all learn something useful for us. So with that, Mark Rosenthal.
I gave him so much more to talk about and introduce me, but time was short. My name is Mark Rosenthal. I'm curator emeritus, Lincoln Park Zoo. I served there for 36 years, but before we start, I want to tell you a story that I think is applicable today. There was a gentleman, older gentleman, and he worked as a greeter at Walmart. We come in, hi, how are you? And he was about 5-7 minutes late for work, and the 20-year-old manager came up to him and says, Jerry, this is the second time in 4 months that you've been late. I mean, you can't be late at this job. And he's going, no, I understand, and it really won't happen again. And he goes, I mean, really, you have to be punctual. And he said, no, absolutely, I understand. He says, wait a minute, Jerry, didn't you say you were in the military, weren't you? He said, yes, I was. He said, well, when you were late for things in the military, what did they say to you? He says, well, what do you mean? What did they say to me? He said, well, when you were late, what did they say to you? And he said, well, they said, good morning, Admiral. Would you like some coffee? And the reason I tell that story is I'm going to tell you about what I was fortunate to do for 36 years. It was a blessing for me. Got to see the world, got to deal with animals, which I wanted to do. But everybody here in the audience, I don't know you, but you've all had adventures. You've all had lives. You've all touched people. And sometimes people don't know your story. I'm just happen to be up here today to tell you my story. So I appreciate everybody here and know that just like Jerry, who happened to be in the military, everyone has a story to tell. My story is about my time at Lincoln Park Zoo. Now, you may know, let's see, they told me how to do this. Let's see. You may know Lincoln Park Zoo because many of you have grown up in the Chicago area. I'll tell you a couple of other things about this zoo. It's over 150 years old. I didn't work there all the time, but I was there for what I consider a very wonderful chunk of time. And these are some of, actually, this guy over here, I actually worked with him when I was a young kid, and he was an old guy, senior person at the zoo. But the thing is that all these people helped to make the history of a place that I spent a lot of time with. And I learned a lot of lessons, which we'll talk about from the animals over the years. Now, the one that I have to mention to you is the gentleman on the right. His name is Henry Hunterman. And Henry used to walk the black leopard on the zoo grounds. This is a full-grown black leopard. Now, I interviewed a gentleman named Danny Bostrom. I say names because you're going, who's Danny Bostrom? But it's important to mention the people because they were in existence, they contributed. And Danny was 90 years old when I talked to him, and he knew this guy, it's 1930s. And Danny, I said, Danny, who is this guy? He's just a nameless person with a black leopard. This is a wonderful, iconic photo. And Danny said, well, that's Henry Hunterman. I go, oh, wow. And was Henry Hunterman the head of the lion house? No, he worked in the birdhouse. And I go, okay, if he worked in the birdhouse, why was he walking the black leopard? He gave me a great 1930s answer. He says, because he liked to. And I said, okay. This guy here, some of you, I remember seeing this guy here. This is Bushman, famous gorilla who's now mounted specimens at the Field Museum. But this is Bushman with his keeper, the person who took care of him for all of his life. And this is, again, a 1932 photo of a young Bushman. This is Judy the elephant, who used to live in the small mammal house. I always thought that was funny. Small mammal house. And I worked with Judy, and I didn't work with Bushman, and I certainly didn't work in the 1930s at Lincoln. Now, one of the most interesting things I found out about the history of the place I worked at is this. If you've seen a nickel with the Indian head, this is Alfred Parker, second director of the Lincoln Park Zoo, and he's with a gentleman, you can Google him, Two Guns White Calf, who is reportedly the model that was used for the Indian head nickel. You can look it up. There's some debate about it, but he was obviously there at Lincoln Park Zoo during the 20s when Alfred Parker was the director of the zoo. Always found that fascinating. Okay, what have I learned from animals? First of all, I don't know if anybody has a dog or a cat here at home, but sometimes you're learning things about how they work and how they go about their daily chores and their business, and they're teaching you things. But I had exotic animals. And this little guy here with a young Mark Rosenthal is Frank the gorilla. And Frank was somebody that when I first was an animal keeper, he was part of the animals that I was taking care of. And he was a young guy. Now, as Frank grew older, I would still go in with him because he thought that I was the alpha animal. I was the big cheese. Where in reality, and in the top photo, oh, by the way, as we go through these photos, you're going to see a transformation of Mark Rosenthal from a beard to a lot of hair to a mustache. So you're going to, throughout the years, we all change. But Frank and I used to hang out together. And one day, he thought, well, let's play. And our play was fairly rough. He jumped on me and he landed and hit me in the kidney with his 200 pounds, and which he is about in that photo. And I went down. And I thought to myself, do I need to stay here? Because at some point in time, he's going to understand that I'm not the top guy, that he is. I knew he was, but he didn't. So I was powerful. But if that changes, now I could lift up my sleeves here and show you the 46 stitches but I don't. There are no stitches. Because I realized that, yes, power perceived, I was the guy, but at some point in time, he was going to get smarter than me. And then I would not have the advantage. I couldn't hang out with my buddy, so to speak. And so I learned that, and I walked out of that after he put me down. In play, I walked out of there and said, it's not smart to go back in, which I didn't. And but the time I had together was very good. Now, this guy here, you got to follow through with your job, I was taught. This is the heir apparent to Bushman, and this is Sinbad, the gorilla. Now, when I started at the zoo as a lowly animal keeper, the senior keepers would kind of set you up, but you wouldn't know it because they thought that was fun for the new kid. So they said to me, Mark, you need to clean behind Sinbad's exhibit in the back, which is fine. And all the other primates, there were a whole long line of primates. So I started to take my push broom and I was pushing the debris and the celery that was thrown out and all the apples and just getting it into a drain. And as I am doing this was lunchtime, all of the senior keepers are in the room watching me because it's lunchtime and they're going to have their lunch together. Used to play pinochle over lunch. And they were watching. Why? Because as I'm getting by and close to Sinbad, who didn't know me, I was a stranger to him, I noticed that he had his hand cupped because he had taken some poop. And he was going to throw it at this person that he didn't know. And I realized that as I'm getting close, and then but I have nowhere to go. There's only one way out. I can't stop. I got to follow through with my job. But I know what the consequences are of following through. So I decided that the only way to do it would probably be to bluff my way through. So ultimately what I was doing was just like whistling in a graveyard. I was just do, 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 and I just kept going. And he's looking at me like, you're not reacting the way you should. You're not running. You're not doing anything. Who are you? And as I got close to the door, as all these senior keepers were watching me, got close to the door, he realized, oh my God, he's at the door. And he charged in his exhibit and he threw the poop, and I'm just at the door. He threw it at me, and like a machine gun, it hit the back wall because I ducked and got in, and it was like, bop, 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 bop. And all those senior keepers thought it was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. But I learned many times then was follow through. If you have a job, follow through with it. Do it as well as you can, but you can't. As a matter of fact, today, I was supposed to give a talk, this talk on November 5th, I think, the 5th. And I had made a commitment to the North Shore. And in my other job, I joke and say I traded, after 36 years, I traded lions and tigers for dogs and cats. And today, my other job, that I took a day off today, is working for Cook County Animal and Rabies Control, another part of my life. There was an international conference called Rabies in the Americas. We could talk about rabies, that's a whole different lecture. But it's a disease that kills people. There is no cure for rabies if you don't get treated. And I was told, Mark, we need you to go to this international conference. It's November 3rd through the 8th. And I said, I can't do it because I made a commitment to that guy over there. And I said, I would be there for the 5th. And then, as we say, Bashert calls me up and he says, Mark, if you can do this, if you could see your way to come another date, like the 12th, if that's possible. And I said, absolutely, it's possible. And it all worked out. So I was able to, but I was ready to follow through. I had made a commitment, and that was my primary thing. If Bob had asked me after the conference was going to go, and I had made the commitment to the conference, I would have said, thank you, but I can't do it. Always have a B plan. Always. Everything doesn't always go the way you think it should. In this crate, is a giraffe, a young giraffe. So we received word from Christchurch, the zoo in Christchurch, New Zealand, and they said, we are looking for a young giraffe for two or three things. It has to be under 12 feet. It has to be a new genetic line. And we have to find one that fits these criteria. We had one. We had a baby born. And we said, well, it's new genetic line for New Zealand, and it certainly is under 12 feet. It's growing, but it's under 12 feet. Giraffe, when they're born, are about my height. And they said, okay, we're interested. We said, that's great. And here's a little fact. It was going to go by air. Qantas was going to fly it there. And in order to get into a 747, may have changed, but when I was doing it, the doorway is 12 feet. That's it. And if you're in a military cargo plane, it's a lot different. The front opens up. They can put a lot of things in there. But for cargo, it's 12 feet. That's it. So we said, well, we have a young giraffe and we'll be willing to send it to you for no money. You just have to make all the arrangements. So Qantas did. And we had to build a special crate for the giraffe because we knew that when the giraffe was in the crate, once it's in the plane, which is this way, you can raise the crate top, but it has to be done in a certain way. So you give the giraffe some additional room. And the carpenters had to build it, the Park District carpenters had to build it in such a way that it met the dimensions for being on a pallet. Because once a container is on a pallet, the airlines, it can be 50 tons. The airlines can move it all over the place. And we built it to their specifications. Then I got a call from the airlines and they say, Mark, we made a mistake in the measurements. You need to take 6 inches off the crate. I had the crate built. So I had to bring the carpenters back in. And I said, now they were invested in this. And I said, guys, we have to do this. And they were like, are you serious? That's rebuilding the entire crate. And I said, this is your giraffe going, come on. So they were very good about it. And they rebuilt the entire crate to fit on the new dimensions. So now comes the point where we have to move this giraffe into the crate. And I had moved a dozen giraffes. I knew exactly what I was doing. I knew how to do it because I had the experience. And someone once said, you're only as good as your last shipment. If you do 1,000 giraffes, but the last shipment doesn't go so well, that's all they remember. But I had done a lot of successful giraffe movements, never internationally, but putting it in a crate was not a big deal. So we had everybody stationed, trained, and the way you move a giraffe, you might not need this in your lifetime, but the way you move a giraffe, the giraffe, you build a wall, portable wall. And as the animal is there, you're moving the wall, temporary wall, so the animal is moving away from it. Once the animal gets to where it's supposed to go in the crate, it goes into the crate and you close the door. It's very, very simple. And I hadn't, because I'd done it so often, I knew I didn't need another plan because I knew what I was doing. So we had everybody there and it's going perfect. The keepers that we had, all young keepers, and they were there, they pushed it, and the giraffe went in to the crate, and then the other keepers closed the door too slowly. And the giraffe muscled his way out, just pushed out because he didn't want to be in the crate, but the door closed too slowly. And now he's in the hallway, and he can't, we tried, oh, come on. And he kicked the portable wall, destroyed it. So we pushed him back. Oh, he wanted to go back to the barn. He wanted to go back to where he was, and he did. He went back. So all the young keepers are looking. What are we going to do, Mark? What are we going to do? Because we had a lot of Qantas, the airplane was going. We had all this paperwork we had filled out to bring a species internationally. There was no turning back, but here, my A plan had just not worked. And they said, what are we going to do? I had no clue. But you can't say that to people who are looking to you for leadership. What are we going to do, Mark? I said, it's no big deal. I got another plan. I know exactly what we have to do. I had no clue, but I couldn't tell them that. We had our vet there. We had the carpenters there because this was in February, cold, and they were going there because once we got the giraffe in the crate, we were going to put it on the truck. Then the carpenters had to build another compartment to protect it from the cold with heaters inside to get to O'Hare. All these people are waiting. So I talked to the vet. He said we could give a little tranquilizer, not enough so the animal just kind of ease and like twilight sleep. And I said, okay, gave the shot, and the giraffe started to walk again. Oh, and the carpenters rebuilt the wall, not as good as the original, but they pieced it together. And we got the giraffe, and every time we got close to it, giraffe, but it was a little out of it, and we finally got it to the crate, and this time the giraffe went in, closed the door. My mouth was so dry. I was so nervous. But once we got the giraffe in the crate, here you see it. This is right here. We're at the zoo here, and here Qantas is moving it once we got to the airport, and we got him in, and the way it, again, some facts for you. If you're flying a giraffe, you can't have the airplane go all the way up to its altitude, flying speed, and all the way down. It has to go up because of the circulatory system of a giraffe, and acclimate, and then down. So here was the flight plan. Chicago to San Francisco, up. And the pilots are like the captains of a ship. They make the decision if they want to do it or not. Up, down. Then you go up to Hawaii, down. Then you go from there, up to Pago. Please, I don't even know where it is. Then you go down. And ultimately, it got to the northern island where Auckland is in New Zealand. But Christchurch, for all you geographic people, is on the southern island. So they had to wait for the tide because now it had to be put on a ship and had to be loaded. The giraffe's name was Gerald. They changed it because the bank was in New Zealand was sponsoring his Herald, and he ultimately got there okay. New Zealand had sent an escort. The other thing, little factoid, is when you escort an animal anywhere in the world and it's on a plane, it's always last on cargo and first off. You're not waiting for anything else to be unloaded. So Gerald ultimately made it to New Zealand, but that proved to me, Mark, I don't care how much you've done it, how sure you are of what you're doing, always truly have a B plan. Another iteration of Mark Beard. So this is to help people succeed is so important. This little guy here is what's called a dwarf hamster, Phodopus robruski. Now, I saw these and they were listed from the London Zoo, and I called, we called the London Zoo, and we said, we'd like to get some of these. Can I get like 2 pair? Dwarf hamsters, just little guys like that. And they said, no, we only sell them by the dozen. That should have been my first clue of how reproductively active they were. But I said, I really want these. So we brought a dozen over, and that little guy, and we put them in the small mammal house. And we did want to breed them. So we had them in these individual behind the scenes breeding boxes. And in each box was everything they would need. And then also there was like a little house that they could go in. And you could open at the top and see if everything was okay, because they were sleeping. And ideally, if you were an animal keeper at the zoo, the first thing you have to do in the morning is grab a cup of coffee and check your animals. You don't have to do anything else. Just make rounds and what you're responsible. Is everybody okay? Is anything changed? That's what you have to do. So I walk into the small mammal house and I go in the back where these guys are. And I'm looking, and I open. I see a female with babies. And I go, oh my God. Then I think, why am I discovering this? The keepers are supposed to do this, not me. No one's been checking. So I could go out to the keepers who were having coffee, and the guy who was in charge of this section, a young man who's new, and I could say, what the hell is going on? But no, this was an opportunity to do a teaching moment and to help someone succeed. So I went to him and I said, hey, Joe, have you checked in the back yet? Well, no, I was going to. Well, okay, why don't we check? And we go in the back and he says, well, everything's. I said, let's look at each hamster and see if they're all okay. I mean, that's what we should do. We go to the first one. He lifts it up. Oh, yeah, he's there. Oh, that's great. Go to the next one. Oh, look at that. He's sleeping. That's great. Go to the one I knew where the babies were. And he lifts it up. He goes, oh my gosh, babies. I said, Joe, look what you discovered. By doing that and making your rounds, that's amazing. How fabulous. I didn't say, hey, I knew what's going on here. It was a teaching moment. See how important it is for you to do these things and have a protocol and after that, every day, he was my guy. He was always checking. So always try and do something to help people succeed. It's so important. All right. Sometimes there are challenges in life. Got to kind of figure out how to do things. We dealt with a lot of people at the zoo. And we dealt with the fire department of various municipalities because they would give us old fire hose that we could use for the gorillas and great apes, and they'd swing on it. It was, pretty sturdy. And I met one of them, and I said, I would love to get a fire hat. Oh, Mark, don't worry, take care of it. So he gave me really a cool old fire hat. So I brought it home. And I gave it as a gift to my wife with a bottle of champagne, I believe. And I presented to her. Oh, what? I said, you're putting out fires. So she's an artist, watercolorist, teaches here at North Shore. Blatant plug. So it was really cool. It's a nice little gift. Hangs in her home studio. One day, I get a call from the assistant curator at the zoo. Mark, we got a problem. What's that? Well, as it turns out, the two keepers who are working with the elephants, they're arguing, and they don't want to work with one another. And they won't listen to me. I'm on my day off. And he said, I need your help. I mean, well, first of all, you have to have two people to work with the elephants because they're potentially could harm somebody and you don't want to be alone. And it's just good protocol to have two people working together with such large animals. And I said, well, they have to work together. We can't have one person do it. They won't. I don't know what to do. I said, tell you what. I'm going to come down there. I'll talk to them. Oh, thank you, Mark. Thank you. I said, fine. He said, do you want to go to the elephant area? And I'll meet you there. I said, no. I'm going to tell you when I'm on the grounds, and you're going to bring them up to the conference room in the director's office. Oh, why? I said, because I don't want to be on their territory. Little hint in business. I don't want to be on their territory. I want them to come to me. If you think about it, has anybody ever been to the circus and you've seen the lion or tiger act? Usually what happens is the trainer first goes in And then the cats come out and puts them on their stools and so forth for this act. They're not in there and then he walks in. They come into his territory. It's a psychological thing. So I didn't want to be where the elephants were. I wanted them to come to me. So as I leave the house, I say to Ingrid, my wife, I say, I need your fire hat. She says, well, why do you need my fire hat? I said, I need it. So I took it, get to the zoo, go to the conference table. I put the fire hat in the center of the table. And I called the curator, assistant curator. I said, bring them up. So they come up, they enter the room. They know who I am. I mean, they sit down. I don't say a word. And they're looking. I don't say anything. And then one of them says to me, what's the fire hat in the middle of the room doing? Which is what I wanted him to say. And I said, oh, whenever I have to put out a fire, I bring my hat. And from there, broke the ice a little. And from there, we discussed why it was safety and important to work with the elephants and that they understood. I said, you don't have to go out and have drinks with each other, but you got to do your job. You got to be professionals here. So sometimes with that, when there's a challenge, you have to look at a different kind of approach potentially to get things done, potentially. Adapting to the job, you got to innovate. I get a call at midnight. Mark, from the police officer who was at the zoo. We had one police officer who was on light duty from Chicago Police Department, and he was on duty. You know, he'd be there at night. Nothing goes on. But it was light duty for the police officer. Mark, this is midnight. The lions are loose. What? Well, I woke up pretty quick. What do you mean they're loose? He says, I said, are they loose on the grounds or are they loose in the building? Oh, no, they're loose in the building. Well, it's kind of like the FBI. It's a contained situation. They're not going anywhere. I said, okay, I'll be right over. Do you want me to call for reinforcement, Mark? I said, nah, let's not worry about that. Just because they're in the building. Let's not make a big deal out of it. And I rushed to the zoo. Now, I'm not the police officer's boss, and this was animals loose, especially lions. He calls his commander, and as I get to the zoo, I'm like 5 minutes from the zoo. As I get there, ringing the perimeter are police cars with their lights on. And as I get to the gate to get in, I know these police officers because they were in the 18th precinct. We knew them. They'd come to the zoo. One of them said, Mark, do you need help? Do you want us to go in with you? I said, no, just stay out here. It's okay. Don't worry about it. So I go in and he's afraid. And I said, where are they? He says, well, they're in the back. And here's what had happened. The keeper had forgotten to lock the lock. And so when the lions saw that the lock, they pushed against the gate, it opens up. And then they saw the hose, the hose to clean the cages, and they dragged it into their exhibit. Well, the police officer saw that they were chewing on this hose, and he thought, you know what? Probably what happened was the keeper left the hose close, and they got it. I'll go in the back because he knew what was going on, and I'll just pull the hose out. And when he turned the corner to do this, he came face to face with the male lion. And they scared each other. Male lion ran one way, he ran the other. That's when he called me and said, Mark, lions are loose. So I get there and he explains the situation. And I'm not going to go look for the lion. What can I use? How do I protect myself? What can I do? Innovate, think, what's going on? Fire extinguisher. I don't need a gun. I need something else. And I knew that a fire extinguisher would make a loud noise and CO2 spreads, and that will scare the lions if I come in contact with them. And I go with him. He's behind me. And We go to the back and there's a lion and they go run away into another area. So now I have lions loose. I have no way that I know to get them in instantly. I don't want to tranquilize them because there's more than one. And I, being a good employee, I call my boss. Now, my boss at the time was Dr. Lester Fisher. And Dr. Fisher, I call him on the phone and his line is busy. Okay. So I don't stay on the phone and no, by the way, more police are coming into the building. More police are coming in. And I called a couple of keepers, get here when you can, but we need help. And as I'm trying to assess the situation and figure out how we're going to do things and what can we do and so forth, Dr. Fisher, he lived across the street, runs into the lion house. Mark, why didn't you call me? What's going on? I said, wait, stop. I said, I tried to call you. Your line was busy. Did you want me to take care of the situation? Or did you want me to stay on the phone? Oh, no, okay. I said, here's where we are. And what had happened was the people, newspaper reporters, they would listen to the shortwave for fire and police. And they heard on the airways, lions loose at the zoo, because that's why the police were all there for their protocol. And so they called my boss, Dr. Fisher, and they said to him, can you comment on the lions being loose at the zoo? Well, he doesn't know what's going on. Now I'm trying to reach him, but he's on the phone. And he goes, oh, I'm sure if the lions were loose, my staff would let me know. Hangs up the phone, runs to the zoo. Which is, then I see him. And all of a sudden, there's another little known fact. I'm not sure how they do it now, but there in the police department is a SWAT vehicle. They may have more than one, I don't know, that is on the streets 24 hours a day. They come in, they change shifts and so forth. So if they're ever needed, God forbid, they're deployed and ready to go. And they call it the war wagon. And they have SWAT, guns and people and so forth, all the technology. So they bring that to the zoo. And we tell them, you got to keep it outside on the grounds. It's contained. We'll let you know if we need help. And because it was so unique, all of not only are the patrolmen there, but now you have lieutenants and you have the commander who comes and all the heavy brass are there and the lights in the back area where the lions were not functioning. So I'm trying to use a flashlight to see what's going on. And I see a police officer with a flashlight and I grab it from him and he pulls back and I said, I need this. Oh, okay. That was the commander. I thought I needed. We go there and we said, we need to have some communication. So the commander calls, Sergeant, on the war wagon, get me the A-22 walkie-talkies. And he goes out, comes back. He said, sir, they're not functioning. I don't know what happens in an emergency, but they weren't functioning. I said, okay. What they did then was they had what the police, you see the police, they talk on their walkie-talkies. They gave us 2 walkie-talkies, one for people in the front looking at the lions, and one for the police officer who was going to go with me to the back. So they say all the lions are in their exhibit because they had free roam in the back because doors open. And I go in with my fire extinguisher. And the police officer comes behind me with a shotgun, which I didn't really want it, but they were the police. And then they say, 2 animals are coming out. So then we back up. They're all back in. So then we go there. And that went on for a couple of minutes. And finally, they said, okay, they're all in. And we get in there and there's the door. It's open and the locks are sitting there. The keeper forgot. And we close the door. The police officer uses his handcuffs, locks the door with the handcuffs, and we're all okay. But instantaneously, in those type of situations, it taught me that when you get a job, sometimes you got to figure out what you're doing because there's no clear path to what's happening. I love this shot. Be prepared. Again, young Mark Rosenthal. I was a curator at the zoo, so I felt I was entitled to not have to be there at times at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to sleep in late today. And just as I was sleeping in late, phone call, Mark, the polar bear is out. This is a very dangerous situation. So, but it was out on the grounds, not just in a building. So again, I rushed to the zoo, but to be prepared. Now, we were prepared for emergency situations. They would be very, very, very rare, but we were prepared for them. And so in this instance, we had tranquilizer rifles, we had the drugs, everything was where it should be in case of an emergency. And so when I got to the zoo, one of the other keepers literally handed me the rifle, handed me the drugs, the tranquilizer drugs, and we went to the scene where the polar bear was roaming around. And what had happened was when it was wintertime, they would squirt a big fire hose stream of water into the pool, and that froze. And the polar bear literally walked up that ice bridge out into an area of the zoo. So here was the polar bear at this thing, all the police were there, and there were helicopters, and it was a big deal. And I load up the tranquilizer, and the polar bear is walking. He's walking. He's turning. He's walking. But you need to have a good shot. You can't just shoot it anywhere because you want to get the shot you need. So this gentleman here was the curator of reptiles. That's a real gun. There's the police officer with a real gun. I mean, they were there ready to do whatever they had to do. So I get the tranquilizer ready to go, and I'm literally doing this, following the bear. And right behind me is Dr. Fisher, and he is right in my ear. And he says to me, "What are you waiting for?" And I, in a situation like that, you're not thinking like, what's the political thing to say here? I'm waiting for a good shot. And he says to me in my ear, "Shoot him anywhere. Shoot the bear." Said, "Yes, sir." We got a good shot off. And then the bear went, bear's not dead, the bear's tranquilized. But again, preparation, you absolutely never know what's going to happen in the zoo for whatever circumstances they may. But I realized, and we always were, in life, you need to be prepared. And as an aside to that, my sister moved to Naples, Florida, from the Midwest. She learned what a go bag is. A go bag, and if there's an emergency, fire, hurricane, you need a bag with all your important documents and clothes or whatever you need to walk out of the house, put in your car, and go. A go bag. Be prepared. She also learned that you should have money in that go bag. Can't have $300 in $100 bills. No one's going to have change. You got to have it in 5s and 10s. Who knew? But be prepared. So that's what I learned from this little incident at the zoo. Lean on knowledgeable people for advice. This is, we had a medical committee at the zoo made up of physicians from Northwestern, Children's Memorial, all kinds of things. And we leaned on them for their expert advice, not just veterinarians, because medical community dealt with a lot of things that happened to our animals. This little baby gorilla was with her mom, and the mom was in a fight with the male, and the baby dropped to the floor, injured her head. We rushed her to Children's Memorial Hospital. And because we had people on the medical team who were from Children's Memorial, and they treated her as one of the nurses said, who's there? Is that the governor's daughter? I mean, there was no less than senior residents were being pushed aside by department heads. We're going, I'll take care of this, dealing with the gorilla. But we didn't have the expertise to do it. And so we brought gorillas to Northwestern. We brought gorillas to Children's Memorial. We really we had one of our physicians was a gentleman named Dr. John Heffron. He was a physician for the Chicago Bulls. He was an orthopod. And he took care of Frank, that gorilla that you saw earlier. He aspirated Frank's knee. And then he had to do another operation with another gorilla. And he brought his whole medical team to the zoo. And they did this operation. And before they started, he said to his medical team, don't worry, no malpractice on this one. So I had a friend of mine who was an attorney. I had him send Dr. Heffron a letter claiming malpractice and wanting a case of bananas. But these knowledgeable people, when you got people who, I go to a tax accountant, I'm not that smart. I want somebody who knows what they're doing. And we were very fortunate, and I learned, lean on people who know exactly what they're doing. Train a team. This is the first elephant born in the history of Lincoln Park Zoo, history of Illinois. There's never been one born. This took 2 years, 2-year gestation, 1 year with a male in Springfield, Missouri. So it was a long gestation, so to speak. And during this time, we were making all kinds of plans. We had volunteers. We had video 24 hours a day. You didn't know when the birth was going to, at night, all these volunteers, they'd come to me and say, Mark, nothing's going on. Nothing's going on. We're here all night. I said, this could be like the lotto. This could be the night. You never know. And so ultimately the baby was born. But when it was born, I had been already made a commitment, and I was in Mexico doing a teaching on Zoom management, which I'd already made that commitment. And the week I left, the baby was born. I put 3 years into this. Now, when I got back, people said to me, oh, Mark, you must be disappointed. You did all this work. I mean, other people, there are a lot of people on the team, it wasn't just me, but you should be, are you disappointed and sad that you weren't here for the payoff? I said, look, I'm happy because what? The team was prepared so well, they didn't need me. I wasn't necessary because the preparation was, they knew exactly what to do, and they did a great job. So to me, when you train your team so you're not needed, you've been a good manager, ultimately. Okay, life lesson. Does anybody remember? Sometimes we're going back in time. Ray Rayner? Okay. Ray Rayner came to the zoo and he would do Ark in the Park. And Ray Rayner, good guy, very nice. He used to wear the jumpsuit with all the notes and stuff. And so one day we're in the Lion House and Ray has to go to the Children's Zoo for filming. He says, Mark, come along with me. I said, Ray, you don't know where the Children's Zoo is? You've been here a little while. No, you don't understand. You're going to be the bad guy. What? He says, people are going to come up to me and they're going to want my autograph and they're going to want a picture and I'm going to do it. But then you're going to say to me, Mark, Mr. Rayner, we have to go now. You're going to be the bad guy. I'm not. He was very smart. I mean, he knew what he was doing. So indeed, we go through the zoo and kids are mobbing him and he's just, oh, kids, here, I'll sign the picture. And then I give him a couple of minutes and I go, oh, Mr. Rayner, we have to go. And he was, kids, I want to stay. But this man here, he says I have to go. So he wasn't the bad guy in the situation, which made me think, if you can put it in a different way, you don't have to be the bad person. You can actually be the good guy, but you got to know what you're doing. Even famous people would come to the zoo. my father was born in London many, many years ago, so we still have relatives. I got to meet Prince Philip when he came to the zoo years ago, and I made sure I had a picture in the crowd with him. Although I met him personally, there was no photographer, and I sent it to my cousins in England and said, see, they're not royalists, so they didn't care. But Jay Leno came, but my most famous guy was Ronald McDonald. Come on, how do you beat that? Now, I'm going to end this now with a blatant plug, I am going to say that this is my website, zooaquariumvideoarchive.org, and it's an attempt to preserve the wisdom, the knowledge, and the stories of people in my profession, zoo and aquarium profession, for younger people coming up, those who are interested in zoos and volunteers. It's there. And I always try and explain it to people, and I say here, when you were younger, or even now, have your children or grandchildren sat down with you with a video and said, tell me about the family history? Because who knows the family history and can go back further than you guys? That's the idea behind this, that those zoo directors, and somebody's talking about Alzheimer's or originally as the program started. There's a gentleman named Jack Hanna. Maybe you don't. Jungle Jack. It's on TV. Jack Hanna, I interviewed him. I did the longest interview with him ever. And Jack has Alzheimer's. He's now living in Montana. No one will ever talk to him for the 4 hours, 5 hours that I talked to him about his life. So the idea of this website is to do that. So it's a blatant plug if you have an opportunity. Does anybody remember Marlon Perkins? Marlon Perkins, the first television show ever in the history of television was Zoo Parade with Marlon Perkins, filmed at Lincoln Park Zoo. First ever. The shows are on this website. Absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So I thank you all for hanging out with me and learning about what I did a while back, and appreciate it. Got any questions? Happy to.
Excellent presentation, Mark. Arnie will take questions from the auditorium and we'll see if any from Zoom.
Mark, did you have to go to school? You must have had training. You can't
No,
not
not
have all
really.
that
No,
knowledge.
no. Yes, of course. I was by academic training, I'm a zoologist by academic training. But a lot of stuff you learn on the job. You know, you could graduate with a PhD from wherever in zoology, but do you know how to put a giraffe in a crate? Those are things that are absolutely learned, experiential things along the way with life. I mean, whatever it happens to be. So I do have academic training, and I'll tell you a very, very quick story. When I first was at the zoo, I was the new kid, the new young zoologist, and everybody, you know, who's he? And one day I was walking by, and they were trying to rope a baby buffalo to see what had just been born. What was its sex? But the mother wouldn't separate, so they had to try and rope it, bring it closer to them so they could look. And they kept failing. They were roping. They were throwing it. Now, I know how to rope in theory. It's not like I'm an expert roper, but I knew in theory what you're supposed to do. So I saw that they were doing it wrong. I mean, I knew that much. And I went up to them and I said, you're throwing the rope the wrong way. And the keeper who was in charge, here. And he gave it to me. Okay. So I knew in theory how to do it. So I go, pop, 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 and I hit that buffalo, got it, bam. And they all went, oh. And I was smart enough to know, leave the scene. And I handed the rope to him. I said, here, continue. And I walked away going, that was so lucky. And after that, like reputation. After that, my reputation was made, mistakenly, as an expert roper. Never did it again. Everybody thought I was good.
I was raised next to not far from the Lincoln Park Zoo, and I remember seeing Marlon Perkins doing his live broadcast. And also, I'm old enough where I saw Bushman while he was still alive, and it was very, very interesting. The Lincoln Park Zoo itself is an extremely welcoming and interesting place. But fortunately, as I said, I was raised not far from there, and we went there regularly. Yeah.
Well, I can, your comment, I can tell you that Bushman, you learn from experience and hopefully you get better at it and you learn from other people and things that happen. The way Bushman was maintained is not what it should have been, but it's what they knew then. And the experiential and learning has gone this much now, where gorillas are in troops. They have a lot of enrichment. There's so much more that's done, and hence there's been breeding within these troops over the years. But Bushman was the very first gorilla, and he was one of the first gorillas in the United States. Not the first, but one of the first. Absolutely.
When you had to leave the compound of the primate because you knew he was too strong and you could no longer be there, did he grieve? And could you tell?
The way I would say to you is this. First of all, I still had interaction with the animal. I just wasn't in with him. Sometimes we give anthropomorphism. Sometimes we give human qualities to animals. Was he grieving? I would say no, probably not, because no, I was there. I saw him every day. You know, it wasn't like, I was just removed. But no question that chimpanzees and gorillas, but certainly chimpanzees, will recognize someone that has been away a long time and, and has been a friend.
Mark, can primates like the ones you've dealt with, do they understand human commands, and can you understand how they're communicating back to you?
Sometimes the vocalizations, you understand generally what's going on. I mean, I can tell you that you could tickle a chimpanzee and they'll laugh. I've done it. Sometimes when you give them their favorite foods, that's telling you, oh, this is good. I like this. So you learn certain things, I'm still, I'm an expert with animals, but I'm still trying to figure out how to train our dog. All right.
We have a question in the back.
I'm at a loss.
We have a question in the back.
Just a quick question. Is there a story behind why Bushman is displayed at the museum in a crouched position and not standing?
The question is, why is he displayed
He's
at
a
the museum?
magnificent animal. He was a magnificent animal, and when he stood, he was just absolutely incredible. And the Field Museum chose not to display him in that particular position.
Okay, and here's what I understand. He is displayed as a mounted specimen, Bushman. First of all, he had really great PR. I mean, seriously, when he died, it was front page headlines. I'm not going to get that. Okay. I mean, he was a known Chicago celebrity. So when he died, my wife and I have gone to Africa. We have seen the mountain gorillas, and a traditional posture is not standing up necessarily, but it's on all fours. And so they mounted that animal in that traditional as they would be in life.
Mark, over here.
I've been around animals as much as you have. How do they communicate with each other non-verbally?
Well, I think that it depends on the species. Whales, well, non-verbally, but whales have, whale songs. Movements, but vocal communication is a lot. Sometimes you'll see that with cats, mother leopards or lions. They will do certain vocalizations that tell the kids come over here or stay over there. It depends on the animal.
Mark, over here. Years ago, I was producing television commercials here in the city, and Marlon Perkins used to do parts of his things over at the old Fred Niles studios. You were probably there for a time. And one day I was shooting on one of the stages at Niles, and Marlon was in the stage next to us. Somebody came over and said, Bob, come on over here. They got this little chimp over there. You just got to see it. It's darling. I said, okay. So I excused myself from what I was doing, went over to where this chimp was. The guy who was the VP of sales for Niles was somebody that nobody could tolerate. He was the Herb Tarlick, if you remember that, from KRP. So his name was Manny, and Manny walks onto the set, and here's this chimpanzee that everybody's playing with. So they said, Manny, say hi to the chimp. Manny sticks out his hand, the chimp takes it. They know.
I think we have a Moluccan cockatoo at home, and Moluccan cockatoo loves Ingrid, my wife, and tolerates Mark. I get it, but she's raised him all of his life. So, and he has more of an affinity to women than he does to men. And certainly at times, I've had capuchin monkeys that we used to travel in the traveling zoo that would sit on my shoulder and love me. Why? I don't know, but they did. And no one could get close to me if that monkey was on me. I mean, they were, this guy's mine, you don't get too close. So it depends on the animal, and somehow, whatever the vibes are that you're giving out, I guess. Yes, one last question?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm an elephant lover. Do you know what's going on? It's so sad with the elephants today. Do you know what's going on? It's been terrible.
Are you talking about in the wild?
Yeah, well, they're becoming extinct. Do you know anything about what's going on?
I'll say a couple of things very quickly. Number one, Asian elephants and African elephants. They're both endangered. Asians more than African, mainly because it's the interaction with people and land. There is very little wild out there. And so that interaction, if you're destroying my crops, and that's my livelihood for my family in Asia, let's say, or Africa, that becomes a problematic animal to me. And so that conflict between people and animals in the native habitat is part of what is going on, and there's less land for them to be. Now, as a quick aside, the largest herd of Indian elephants, Asian elephants, was at the Ringling Brothers Circus. Now they're no longer in existence, and they had over 40 elephants in their breeding farm in Florida. Those elephants were purchased by the White Oak Conservation Center, which is in Yulee, Florida, right near the Georgia border. And those elephants were moved to that facility where they are today. And that facility has given them 2,000 acres of land of their 14,000 acres for breeding, reproduction, and doing more. So sometimes you need the space, you need the commitment. But the main thing of what you're speaking about ultimately is conflict with people and habitat. Well, poaching is always there. Rhinoceros, for people think they're aphrodisiacs, the horn and ground up, and elephant tusks. So that's cultural. And you try and move forward with artificial things if you can. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. But there's also that part of why animals are in danger, because someone thinks the product of the animal is somehow beneficial, which it's not. I used to do tours behind the scenes, and we had Marsha the rhino, who was a wonderful animal, and black rhino. And when we walk people behind the scenes, donors, other people, and they'd pet her horn and feel it, and you talk to them about its hair and it's not horn and so forth. And as they were doing that, because you're trying to make a point. As they were petting the horn, I would say, you know, they say that rhino horn is an aphrodisiac. And they're petting the horn. And I go, listen, you just, if you want to lick your hands and get back to me, that's okay. You know, we're trying to be a little funny. And they would look at me and I go, you don't have to do that. Trust me, it doesn't work.
Mark, we got to wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you
guys.
so much.
Thank you much.